In this episode, we talk about a health crisis that is quickly gaining ground, but one that remains largely overlooked. We also talk about Canada's decision to finally invite India to the upcoming G7 summit and what this means for the strained relations between the two countries. But first, we talk about the new regulations introduced in Ladakh last week in response to the ongoing protests in the region. Hi, I'm Ichha Sharma, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express News Show. After months of protests by Ladakhis, which began shortly after the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019, the centre last week notified a series of regulations aimed at addressing their concerns around jobs, quotas, and cultural preservation. These new regulations introduce a domicile-based job reservation system, recognition of local languages, and clear rules for recruitment in civil services. However, they do not address a key demand of the protests, a call for constitutional safeguards under the 6th schedule, which, among others, would restrict land ownership by outsiders. To discuss these new regulations, their drawbacks, and the reactions they have prompted, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to the Indian Express's Deeptiman Tiwary.
Deeptiman, since the bifurcation of J&K in 2019, we have seen massive protests taking place in Ladakh. Talk to us about what people there have been demanding.
See, in fact, initially there was a lot of euphoria about Ladakh being turned into a union territory because it was actually one of the demands in Ladakh that Ladakh should be turned into a union territory because they felt that they were not getting their due from the Jammu and Kashmir government. And there was a lot of concentration on Kashmir region itself. And, if at all something went, it went to Jammu, and Ladakh actually, was sort of ignored. The representation was low, that it's a sparsely populated region, geographically very widespread out, but population density is very low. So they had very few MLAs, and so they thought that, their voices were not heard. So they thought that, becoming a union territory would be great. We would be directly administered by Delhi. But once it actually became a union territory, they realized that it was worse than being under a Jammu and Kashmir government because, they did not get any statehood. It was not even a union territory with an assembly. So they suddenly found themselves that now nobody was listening to them. Earlier at least their MLA could sit on a dharna or could go and raise an issue in the assembly or, make noise about something as public representatives do, and it is their job.
So in some sense, they were worse off.
Yeah, they suddenly realized that they are worse off. So the initial euphoria quickly dissipated and they realized that bureaucracy can actually be quite removed from the people because it is more used to dealing with files than people. So they felt that they were not being heard. And so initially this demand started that, you give us statehood. Then it transformed into give us 6th schedule, and then slowly it transformed into either 6th schedule or statehood. You give either of the two because basically people wanted participation in administration of their own region. So, initially there was not a very positive or great response from the Ministry of Home Affairs because even a committee to discuss these issues was sort of formed only after 4 or 5 years. Then it slowly transformed into a public agitation in Ladakh, and it was famously led by the climate activist Sonam Wangchuk. He is one of the most prominent faces coming from the region, and it continues to go on.
And Deeptiman, what have been the main concerns of the people there? What are they worried about?
See, these tribal regions say that, under the pressure of populations from outside, under pressures of industrialization or ingress of other populations, there will be a demographic change. The character of the region will change and more dominant cultures will diminish the influence of local culture, the tribal culture. So Ladakh is 90% tribal. So they felt that they need to have rights over their land. They need to have rights over the jobs that are generated in that region. And they need to have representative politics so that they can have a say in the decisions that are taken for the region, for the development of the region. But that did not happen. And it directly came under the central rule, and all the decisions were taken by the Office of the Lieutenant Governor and the Ministry of Home Affairs. So this was the peeve that the people had. And so they demanded that you reserve jobs for us, you protect our land, you protect our culture, language. And all of these can be done if you get 6th schedule, because 6th schedule has provisions for making autonomous councils. So like it is there in, say, Bodo Territorial Administrative Council in Assam.
Right, and the reason they want the 6th schedule is also because it gives you the power to make laws on subjects such as forest management, agriculture, administration of villages and towns, inheritance, marriage, social customs, and under it, employment then is mainly given to the locals.
Yeah. That is why they began to demand 6th schedule. And 6th schedule also gives you representation, because there are autonomous council elections and local people get elected, and then legislative bodies are formed, and then they make laws and administer their own regions in their own way. So 6th schedule sort of gives you all the protections that you may actually look for to preserve your tribal identity.
Okay, so after hearing these demands and after months and months of protests, the government last week notified a series of regulations related to jobs and reservations for the local people. Tell us, what do these regulations do?
So, most important regulation that the government has notified is related to domicile, which will actually get you a job in Ladakh or residency. So, unless you have stayed for 15 years in Ladakh, you will not be given a domicile. These are very similar to what Jammu and Kashmir got after bifurcation of the state into 2 union territories. So, on the same lines, 15 years domicile rule was given, that you can be considered a resident of Ladakh only if you have stayed here for 15 years. Then there are other, for some central government, you should have done your schooling from there, passed class 10, 12th from Ladakh. If you are a government employee, who has been stationed there, then there is a period that you have had to stay in Ladakh. Then if you have a residency, then your children can be automatically considered to be residents of Ladakh. So these are some of the regulations which were brought in and notified for domicile. Then the government put a cap of around 85% on jobs in the region. So earlier the cap was only 50%. So basically, a minor amendment has been made into the Jammu and Kashmir Reservation Act 2004, where the act said that SC and ST in this entire region, at that time in 2004 when the act was formed, and it was later extended to Ladakh following the bifurcation. That act says that SC and ST will have reserved jobs equal to the proportion of their population. But it says that it will not exceed 50%. So that the government has extended to 85%. So that virtually pretty much captures the entire tribal population of Ladakh, which is around 90%. So 85%, 90% people will be happy about it. And they are happy about it.
And does this reservation only apply to government jobs, or does it also apply to other institutions?
Yes, so all engineering, medical colleges and all will also have similar provisions for admissions, and it will be 85%. It just excludes the economic weaker section, which the government brought some time back, which is a 10% reservation for economically weaker sections across non-SC/ST categories and OBC categories. So that will apply there. So it has protected both the EWS category and given adequate reservation to the tribal population there.
And you were earlier talking about cultural identity. Now, one of these regulations also relates to the local languages there. Talk about what that is.
So some of the local languages, which are prominent languages of the region, have been made into official languages. So official work can be conducted in those languages. Then the notification regulation also allows for setting up of certain, art and culture institutions which will promote certain other languages which are also endemic to the region. So that way some protection to languages has been given. Then as far as culture is concerned, that too through these cultural institutions that will be promoted. So that is there, but that is not something that was top of the agenda of the people there, because as long as they believe that the demography doesn't change, the culture will hold.
Right, and besides this, what's important to note, of course, is that the government has given all this instead of giving into their demand of the 6th schedule.
Yeah. See, the government is very reluctant to give 6th schedule to anyone, let alone Ladakh. Okay, it is not giving 6th schedule anymore. Even in the northeast, there have been demands from certain quarters for 6th schedule inclusion that is not being fulfilled. Actually, government does not want to give 6th schedule to anyone anymore. That is what is our understanding. So here in Ladakh, what happens is that all these regulations have come under Article 240 of the Constitution. So one of the misgivings there in Ladakh is that under Article 240 of the Constitution, these are all executive decisions. Tomorrow if the government decides that we don't want this business, it can remove these executive decisions or withdraw them. What sixth schedule inclusion will do, it will make a constitutional guarantee. Now to remove sixth schedule is a much cumbersome process because you'll have to bring a constitutional amendment in parliament for that. So that can become more difficult withdrawing something like that. Even bringing something like that is not easy. But yeah, once you've given sixth schedule status, rescinding it can be more difficult.
Right, and Deeptiman, talk about what have been some of the reactions to these regulations.
Yeah, so people who have been negotiating, people from Ladakh, civil society groups, representatives of people who have been negotiating with the government on these demands, say that this is only a partial fulfillment of their demands. And in fact, the government has chosen to address the issue that was more urgent. That is the fear of losing employment. So that government has addressed. They are still hopeful that the government will continue to discuss issues of sixth schedule and statehood or a union territory with an assembly in the next talks which will follow between the representatives of Ladakh and the government. But right now they feel that it is only a partial fulfillment of their demands. Most important of their demands, of course, sixth schedule being one or public representation being one. But at a very fundamental level, they want to actually protect their land. For that, the government has not done anything until now.
And by that, you mean outsiders not being able to buy land in the region?
Absolutely. Outsiders not being able to buy land in Ladakh without the permission of the people in Ladakh. That is what they want. They want that we should have a say. Now the government is looking at doing some industrialization in Ladakh. There is an intention to harness the vast geography of Ladakh and the sunlight it gets for solar power, renewable energy production. But people in Ladakh say that the kind of places which are being chosen for setting up such industry will destroy our pashmina pastures. And so it will directly impact not only our livelihood but also our cultural identity and also have an impact on the ecology. So they say that if there is sixth schedule or there is an assembly and we have the right over our land, how it is going to be used, then we will be able to help the government make informed decisions where we can sort of contribute to projects of national interest without ecological disasters.
And you earlier mentioned Sonam Wangchuk, who has been one of the main people leading these protests. And you spoke to him last week. What did he have to say about all this?
So he has been saying that this was not one of our key demands. Our key demands is sixth schedule and statehood, or at least an assembly, where we can legislate on our issues, on our region. We can decide how our land is going to be used. We can decide what kind of industry is going to be set up here. So he says that he is still hopeful that things will be discussed, but he says that in case, and there is a fear in Ladakh over this, that, what if the government says that this is it, this is all we can give you, it's done now, go back home. So then they're saying that in that case, and in a way, they've been saying that sixth schedule is negotiable if we get similar protections. Like in one of the meetings, what we have learned is that Union Home Minister Ichha had told these delegates that I cannot give you sixth schedule, but I can give you a 371 like protection. So that they will be ready to negotiate, but they are saying that if we do not get representative politics and if we do not get protection of our land, jobs and everything, then our agitation will continue.
And now moving on from the concerns in Ladakh, we focus on an alarming health crisis gradually escalating across the country. For years, India's public health narrative concerning children has largely focused on undernutrition. According to the latest National Family Health Survey, over 35% of children under the age of 5 were stunted, while more than 19% were underweight for their height. However, another alarming crisis that is becoming increasingly prevalent is overnutrition, also known as metabolic malnutrition. This issue refers not only to excess weight or obesity, but also to the silent onset of conditions like hypertension, high blood sugar, and cholesterol imbalances in children who may not even appear visibly unhealthy. A recent study by the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, conducted across more than 3,000 children aged 6 to 19 in both public and private schools in Delhi, has raised sharp alarm bells.
So the AIMS study was prompted by growing concerns over rising non-communicable diseases in India, particularly among children.
This is the Indian Express's Ankita Upadhyay, who reports on health for the newspaper.
So it's considered a red flag because it reveals a sharp increase in obesity and related metabolic disorders among school-going kids. These are the conditions that were once thought to be problems of adulthood. But now what we are seeing is that even children are facing these issues. What makes this worrying is that these early health issues like obesity, high blood pressure, abnormal cholesterol are strong predictors of future diabetes and heart disease. So what we are seeing isn't just about overweight children, but a generation at risk of serious lifelong health complications.
In this segment, we talk to Ankita about what this means for India's children and the long-term health impacts of current lifestyles. Ankita, when discussing changes in childhood obesity prevalence, can you tell us what kind of rise are we actually seeing compared to the last available data?
Right. So the jump has been dramatic. In 2006, there was a similar study conducted by AIMS itself. It pegged childhood obesity at just 5%. Now, in the new study, the average is now 13.4%. And in private schools, it's as high as 24%. That's nearly a 5-fold increase in some groups. Central obesity, which refers to belly fat, has also spiked, affecting about 9.2% of the children surveyed. So this shows a steep upward trend that we cannot ignore. So these are some of the striking features of the study.
Right, and the study notes that while obesity is more common in private school students, issues like high blood pressure are equally common in public school kids as well. So can you talk a bit about this data point?
Right. So that was a striking aspect of the study. While general and central obesity are much higher in private school students, with obesity at 24% compared to just 4.5% in public schools, hypertension levels were also about the same in both the groups, around 7.4%. Interestingly, metabolic issues like high blood sugar and metabolic syndrome were much more common in private school kids, who were 2 to 3 times more likely to have these issues. But public school kids weren't off the hook either, and many showed similar levels of hypertension and poor cholesterol, which suggests serious underlying health concerns, even in the absence of visible obesity.
And the study also found rising cases of something called central obesity. So tell us, why is this type of obesity seen especially dangerous in children?
So central obesity or belly fat is particularly risky because it's not just stored under the skin. It tends to build up around internal organs like liver or other organs, right? So this kind of fat is metabolically active and increases the risk of insulin resistance. Then it causes type 2 diabetes and other cardiovascular diseases as well. So even if a child's overall weight seems fine, a larger waistline, it can be a red flag for dangerous internal changes, and they often go unnoticed for a long period of time.
And Ankita, perhaps the most important insight from this study is that a child can appear skinny and yet they could be metabolically unhealthy. So can you explain what does it mean when we say that someone has a metabolically obese normal weight?
So this was one of the most eye-opening findings of this particular study. Metabolically obese normal weight means that a child may look lean or have a normal BMI, but still shows signs of poor metabolic health like low good cholesterol and high triglycerides or blood sugar issues. In this study, 68% of adolescents had a normal BMI, but 43% of them were still found to be unhealthy. And that's a huge number. It shows that outward appearance isn't always an indicator of internal health. This was especially common in public schools, and it affected nearly half the students in this category.
Right, and given that these unhealthy patterns can be identified in both private and public schools, what signs should schools or parents be watching out for if weight isn't a clear indicator?
So parents and schools need to look beyond the weighing scale. Weight is not the only parameter. Warning signs can include fatigue, poor concentration, frequent hunger, despite the child eating recently, or even mood swings. Lab tests showing low HDL, which is good cholesterol, and high triglycerides or high fasting glucose are more precise indicators. Regular checkups, including waist size measurement and basic metabolic panels, are also very important, especially for kids who appear underweight or of normal weight but have a very sedentary lifestyle or have poor diets. They are always indulging on junk food or are on their phones all the time consistently. They are not much into physical activities or they are not playing outside. So these are some of the indicators where parents should be really careful.
And so, Ankita, what do experts say about the interventions or changes that schools and parents can make to, improve children's lifestyles?
So whatever conversations I've had with the researchers that were involved in the study, a major issue is the quality of food, not just quantity of food. In private schools, it's the availability of junk food and sugary snacks. In public schools, kids are buying cheaper processed snacks and fried street food. Although they are often in small portions, but still high in sugar and salt and fat. And what's common in both these groups is low physical activity and high screen time. Even public school kids are glued to phones, and there's a shared culture of poor food habits and sedentary lifestyle. And that's what is fueling the health crisis. So I think we need to, focus on their food habits and their lifestyle. And the interventions, I think, that can be made from the school and the parents, there are several meaningful changes that can help. I think first, revamping school meals, especially the midday meal scheme, where we can include more protein and fiber and less carbs. Encouraging at least an hour of daily physical activity, it can play a crucial role here. Schools can also teach digital hygiene, which means limiting screen time and promoting outdoor play. For parents, awareness is key because understanding food labels, cutting down on processed foods, and making time for family meals can also make a huge difference. Because ultimately, it's about building a culture where health is a part of everyday life, both at school and at home.
And in the end, we talk about the diplomatic ties between India and Canada. Less than 10 days before it was set to begin, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney invited Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to attend the G7 summit scheduled to be held from 15th to 17th of June in the Canadian city of Kananaskis. The invitation was extended during a phone call between the two leaders, and according to the Indian Express's diplomatic affairs editor Shubhajit Roy, is being seen as a major step towards restoring diplomatic relations between India and Canada that became strained in 2023. In a social media post, PM Modi congratulated Carney on his election win and welcomed the invite. He added that India and Canada, as fellow democracies with strong people-to-people ties, would work together based on mutual respect and shared interests. Carney confirmed the conversation and said that they spoke about the long-standing bilateral relationship between the two countries, including trade, security, and issues related to law enforcement cooperation. Usually, the G7 host invites a few guest countries, and up until last week, Canada had only invited Ukraine and Australia. It is worth noting that India has been invited to every G7 summit since 2019. Prime Minister Modi has attended all of them, except for the one cancelled in 2020. He participated in the 2021 summit virtually and was present in person at the meetings in Germany, Japan, and Italy. According to Shubhajit, the timing of this invitation signals a possible thaw in relations, which took a hit after former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau alleged potential involvement of Indian government agents in the killing of Canada-based Khalistan separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. India denied the allegations, and both countries subsequently scaled down their diplomatic presence in each other's territories. In fact, last month, India's External Affairs Minister S. Shashank held a phone conversation with Canada's new Foreign Minister Anita Anand. That was the first official level political contact between the two sides since Prime Minister Carney took office. During that call, Anand expressed Canada's interest in rebuilding ties with India and diversifying trade relations. Shubhajit also notes that Indian officials now view Carney's leadership as a fresh opportunity to reset the relationship with Canada. The electoral defeat of Trudeau and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, whom Delhi had seen as a sympathetic to pro-Khalistani groups, are viewed as setting the stage for a rest in Canada's policy towards India. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank Bhargava and me, Ichha Sharma. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.